So this is my 2008 Suzuki V-Strom. I've had this bike just over 2 years and still absolutely love it. So if you don't know, the DL650 is Suzuki's adventure or dual sport bike, as they call them. So the beauty, I think, with this kind of bike is that it sort of does everything. So you can see here that I have the sort of top box, I have panniers as well that aren't on there at the minute, so it's great as a touring bike. It is quite a big bike, so when I first passed my test, this was my first bike. When I first got on, I thought, this is huge, but you soon get used to it. It's fairly weighty, but not ridiculous. But like I say, you sort of get used to it. Once you move in, it's manoeuvrable and fairly easy to handle. So from a sort of switchgear perspective, it's got everything you'd sort of expect really. So all your usual sort of controls with your lights, your indicators, the usual kill switch, starter, throttle, front brake, clutch. So everything as you'd expect. So the clutch is a cable, but that doesn't seem to matter. Obviously, we've got sort of brake reservoir there for your front brake and a small one at the back for the rear brake. Front brake's twin disc Nissin, both pretty good. Rear brake again, for a rear brake, which don't tend to be brilliant on bikes, it's pretty good. So dashboard wise and accessory wise, I guess, then the standard, then you've got, again, usual stuff with your speedo, rev counter, it's got a trip meter, things like that. Temperature and a proper fuel gauge, which my previous bike didn't have a proper fuel gauge, and that was really annoying. Then I've actually fitted some other accessories to this. So here we've got an accessory bar. So what I can do is fit my phone on here, or you can attach GoPros, that kind of thing. So that's just this little bracket that goes on the mounts for the screen. At the minute I've got the standard screen on here. I have also got the touring screen, which is it comes down lower, goes a lot higher, and is great for winter or long tours, hence the touring screen. I've got a USB socket that fitted there, so when my phone's on there, I can plug it in and charge it. And I've got heated grips. As I mentioned before, some of the other accessories are things like the top box, pannier bars, the panniers, these engine guards. I've got covers on my radiators, and this solid sump guard down here. So that's about it. Oh, and it's got centre stand here, because this isn't particularly bad, this car park, but on some gravel, having a big centre stand is a lot better than a small stand. So let's take it for a spin. So even at these relatively low speeds, then the bike's really sort of manoeuvrable, easy to handle. Like I say, it sort of stands still, pushing it around, it feels a little bit heavy, but it's not too bad considering the size of the bike. So sort of comfort wise, where are we? So I'm 6 foot tall, can easily get both feet down flat. Obviously wouldn't recommend any sort of adventure bike for short riders because they are quite tall just by definition of what they are. So dashboard layout, all fairly normal, sort of analog dials, but this is a 2008 bike, so it's 10 years old now. So comfort wise, this seat is super comfortable. I've done some sort of long tours with no issues at all. A couple of hours sat on it, you're still fine. Mirrors work really well. They're not the most attractive things, but they do work pretty well. So handling wise, for a fairly big bike, then it handles pretty well too. So it's very sort of manoeuvrable. Won't handle quickly like a sports bike if you just suddenly try and turn, but that's not what it's designed for. It's not a sports bike. Your seating position is nice and upright with my arms stretched out. These bars are quite wide, so it's a really comfortable position for long distance. So suspension wise, it's got normal way up forks on the front, nothing special, they're not adjustable, but they do the job pretty well here. We're just bouncing over these and none of that's really coming through to me. Same with the rear suspension. Rear suspension, you can adjust the preload, So if you're going to put the panniers on loaded up and you've got a pillion, you can make that stiffer so that it's not as saggy, but I don't often feel the need to change that, so that's all fine. So performance wise, it's pretty good. So it's about 70 horsepower, but that doesn't feel slow by any stretch. So as I say, performance wise, so yeah, so the performance is pretty good, like I say, especially for a big bike. Gearbox is pretty good. It's a 6-speed box on this. Clutch is fairly light, easy to grab. I don't think the clutch is adjustable. I've certainly never adjusted it. No, it doesn't look like it. But your front brake is. But again, once I sort of adjusted that when I first got it, I've not felt the need to change that at all. So as is usual for my reviews, I'm going to do the 3 things I like best about this bike and then any negatives. So number 1 is just the all-round ability of the bike. It just does everything you need. It's good for commuting, it's good for touring, it's good for just going out and having a Sunday morning blast. So it just does everything really. So number 2 is sort of linked to the first one really. So it's touring ability. If you want to go away for a weekend, then it's just great. You've got those panniers, you can fit loads in the top box, loads in the panniers. I recently did a sort of few days in Scotland and it was perfect for it. It was comfortable for touring, didn't feel like you were struggling to do long distances and hours in the saddle. So that's number 2, is its touring ability. So number 3 is its reliability. I've had this just over 2 years, as I said previously. I've had no issues. All I've had to do is the standard sort of servicing, and more recently I changed the chain and the sprockets, which was actually a pain in the bum, but that was more down to me I think. But yeah, so there's been no sort of breakdowns, nothing that's needed replacing, and it's flown through the sort of last 2 MOTs with no issues at all. So that's number 3, is its reliability. So for negatives, then I've struggled a bit with this. I guess that if you're either a shorter rider or you're new to riding, you may find it fairly intimidating because it's quite a big bike and quite heavy and quite top heavy. But you sort of get used to that fairly quickly. And that's the same of any adventure bike really. Any other negatives? I think this standard screen could be a bit better and a bit bigger. Wind does tend to come in through these side bits here, and with this helmet it's not too bad, but I've got another helmet and I seem to get a lot of buffeting on the top because it's not quite going over, and that's when I had it set at sort of the top. The way to fix that is to get a bigger screen. So I've got a touring screen, so when I do go touring I swap the screens over, and in winter it's better as well because it gives you more weather protection. I guess the final negative, and this has been a bit nitpicky, is that this is a 10-year-old bike now, so some things do feel a little bit dated. So things like the dashboard, these days it's a lot more sort of LCD and TFT screens, rider modes, those kinds of things. They have ride-by-wire throttle, where this is a good old cable which does need adjustment every so often, and you've got to maintain things a bit more I think with older bikes. But that's it. So all in all I did struggle a bit for negatives. So in summary, what do I think to the bike? Even 2 years on, I think it's a great bike and I'm really pleased that I chose it. I have thought about changing it, but every time I do I just can't justify the sort of expense. Anything I've looked at is at least twice the cost of this, and there's no way I'm going to have twice as much fun. So yeah, so in summary, absolutely love the V-Strom, would recommend it for most people for most types of riding. So that's it for this week. Hopefully you've enjoyed that review. Thought I'd do something a bit different with a long-term review rather than a quick ride. And if you have enjoyed it, or you've got any questions, just ask in the comments. Please do give this video a thumbs up. And if you want to see more sort of reviews, so these are bike reviews, equipment reviews, because I've got a new vlogging camera and setup, so I'm going to be doing something about that. If all that's of interest, then please do subscribe to the channel. So thanks very much, and catch you next time.